Thursday. It's Tech Tip Live, and I am Jen Micklick. So happy to be back with you guys. This week, I have our seasoned veteran technician, Chris Bowman. So excited to work with him again. We are doing everyday GainSeeker time savers. So I'm going to talk here for just a second, get everybody in, gathered, sit down, have something to drink next to you. Just a good reminder that at the bottom of your screen, you should have a Q&A section. You click in there, you can ask your questions. I will get them and I will give them to Chris, and we'll hopefully get them answered. If for some reason it's really detailed, we'll make sure to get with you afterwards. Also, as we always say, please go ahead, give us your feedback, ideas. What would you like to see? We do these for you, so we love to have customer feedback and ideas. So without further ado, I'll be quiet for once, and I'll go ahead and hand it over to Chris. Chris, welcome back to Tech Tips Live.
Hey, thank you. Though I have to wonder if calling me the seasoned veteran is just another way of saying I'm old.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Experienced, right? That's what we say.
Okay, we're going to be covering just a number of things. Some of these, maybe even most of these, will be maybe familiar to some of you, but probably not everybody. So these are some of the things that we put in here to try and help people save time when they're doing their job and using GainSeeker. Starting off with desktops. Desktops have been in the software for decades. They've been in there since before I started with Hertzler. And they were always specifically created for saving time. And the thing we always talk about in training is, hey, if you have a set of charts that you bring up on a regular basis, a daily basis, a weekly basis, save them as a desktop. Then you can just open up the entire set of charts at one time. Another thing that can be a saver is there is an edit open function. So when you open up a desktop, if you click on the edit open, you can change the date time period that's being used by the desktop, change the filter, even change the standards, though that sometimes takes a more chunk of time, and it can almost be easier to open up the charts directly that way. Another thing that we can do with desktops, this is something that we've added in the last few versions and may not be familiar to you, is the dynamic desktop. Now, one of the limitations of a desktop is it always is going to bring up the same data set. In other words, if you build a chart with a specific standard and then you save it as a desktop, it's always going to build that chart for that standard. Well, maybe you didn't run that standard yesterday. With a dynamic desktop, you can actually specify a criteria and have it open up, say, control charts for everything that you ran yesterday, or everything that you ran yesterday on a specific line or machine. Last thing that we mentioned is if you're going to open up a desktop and you have it just staying on the screen, you can actually set things up as a slideshow. So people can just look up there and wait, and it will slide through a whole series of charts making better use of the real estate and still communicating the information that you guys need. So that's all things that we can do with desktops. Dashboards. Dashboards are not something new. We've been using those for a long time. And I always thought the dashboards were a good way to save time, because what they do is they provide you with a very good snapshot of your process, which it processes. And the idea here is it's trying to give you as quickly as possible the information that you need to make your decisions. The key word there is actionable information. The other thing that dashboards do that not everybody is aware of, it gives you easy access to the data behind the scenes. So if I'm going to go ahead and pull up GainSeeker charts to show this, I'll just pull up a dashboard here. And if I want to look at the data behind any of these dashboard elements, I can right-click in here and I can say chart, and I can build a histogram or a data table for any of these data sets. The dashboard is still here open behind the scenes. And for example, this is a dashboard grid. there's actually a data set behind every single one of these squares. If I want to look at, why is the mean running at that for diameter Y, I can right click here and say chart and build up a control chart. So the dashboards not only give you good access and a nice snapshot of what's going on in your processes, but it also gives you immediate access to the raw data behind every one of these dashboard components, so that if something is going wrong that you think, or going on that you think might need to take action on, you can quickly and easily get to that data. That's dashboards. As I mentioned earlier, you have an open edit option for both dashboards and desktops. This screen cap in here is showing you the open edit screen for a dashboard. You can change the date period for any component in the dashboard. If there were multiple components, multiple data sets in here, these would be options you could choose from the drop-down list. Or you could change the date time period for all of them with one step. Same thing with the filter. You could pick whatever retrieval you wanted to change for, or you could change for all of them. The same functionality is available on the desktop. If I click on desktop, I can choose any of these and then choose edit open and have this same screen. This also has a view of, this desktop had 4 charts. Each one has its own retrieval. I could change the filter or the date time period for any one of these, or I could change the filter for all of these at once, or the date time period, filter or date time period. Now, one of the reasons I say this is a nice time saver is if I'm using this dashboard or I'm using this desktop in a weekly meeting, a weekly quality meeting, but the first week of the month, I want to look at not just the previous week, but I want to look at the previous month's worth of data. Well, I don't have to take the time to create 2 different sets of dashboards. I can have one dashboard, then I can close it, click on Edit Open, and change it from the previous week to the previous month. So that's one of the ways where having this Edit Open functionality can be a real time saver for you. Chart skins. Chart skins are, again, something that have been around for a while, but they are relatively new, and not everybody is either even aware of them or paying attention for them, or using them, I should say. Using a chart skin, I'm going to go ahead and close all these charts. Okay, as I'm sure you're all aware, we have all kinds of formatting options. If I go into the settings, there is, under the chart overrides, hundreds and literally thousands of different parameters that you can use to format your chart here. You can change the style of lines here. You can change the colors of the lines, what the symbols are for the data points. You can change the fonts. You can change the colors. You can do all kinds of things. Frankly, I think we give you almost too many options. However, it can take a long time if you've got half a dozen of these, or if you've got a really nice set that you want to use, you get tired of having to reapply them all the time. So what the chart skin allows you to do is to make a whole bunch of changes in the settings here, and then save it and be able to apply it all at once. Using a chart skin is really simple. You can click in here and you can pick one of these, pick your chart skin, apply it, and see that added a lot of changes there. I'll switch back here. Actually, I just opened this again. Now I want to talk about creating a chart skin. You create a chart skin by, like I said, going in once, and you have to apply the changes you want. Everyone, if you don't know about this, the search button is your friend when you are trying to find the settings. So I'm going to talk about, first thing I'm going to do is apply the sigma stripes. So I'm going to turn on the sigma stripes. you're not sure what that does, that's what it does. Another thing I'm going to do is show a bar chart of the distribution over here on the left. And I'll also draw individual points for each subgroup. Okay. See, now we're showing those individual data points as well as the subgroup on the chart. And let's see, if you've got a lot of data points, which I don't have that many here, another setting that can be very nice is the scroll setting. Okay. Now, once you've got these settings all the way you want, you can simply come over here, click on Chart Skins, and you can say Save the current chart overrides and give it a name. Now, if I have a new chart, I can simply click on Settings, Chart Skins, pick my new chart skin, and there we go. So doing like this can save you a lot of time, especially if you have different customers that might like to see the data formatted in different ways. But or you can actually use a chart skin to set a large number of defaults for you. I'll come back to that. Setting defaults. This is one that I personally think is very underutilized in our customer base.
Hey,
I always recommend people when I'm doing the training that you try and think about what are some of the defaults that you want. For example, do you always look at a control chart, a histogram, a combination chart? What is the time period? What is the date period that you use more often than anything else? Things like that. If you are one of those that's always coming in, and every time you're building a chart, you're having to come over here and change control chart to combination chart, and you're coming over to the settings and changing the date time period, I'm going to change it to all data because all the data in my tour database is quite old. But for example, if you're always changing it from default low date to like current week or 1 week ending today or 1 month ending today, consider changing those defaults so that when you first start the software, unless you change it, it will automatically default to showing the combination chart and 1 month of data ending today and 50 points instead of 1,000 points, however you want those. Many of the chart defaults, if they're for how the chart looks, you can actually apply in one fell swoop by creating a chart skin, and then in the administration module, you can apply a default skin. And then all of those changes, you don't have to do them individually in admin, you can do them just by making one setting. Okay. There's another thing where you can save some time if you're constantly creating new standards and you're always having to change things like the number of decimal places, what real-time alarms, or the subgroup size. Out of the box, the subgroup size in GainSeeker is 5, but if your company always uses a subgroup size of 3, change the default subgroup size. Then you won't have to be doing it every single time when you create a new standard. Okay, I see we've got a question here. Jen, you're trying to answer a question, but you didn't include it in the Teams chat.
Hey, Chris. So I did have that in the Teams.
Oh, yes, you did.
Chat.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, good question. The question, by the way, is having to do with desktops. And the question is, can you share a desktop with other users? The answer is yes. As a matter of fact, you almost can't avoid it. when you save a desktop, just like when you save a filter or a bunch of other things in the software, it will automatically be available to everyone who is sharing your configuration. So when you create a desktop, it won't just appear on the list of desktops for you, it will appear on the list of desktops for everyone using that same configuration, which again is one of the reasons why I always stress use good names when you name desktops and filters, retrievals, and all of that. Because it won't just be you that's seeing the name of that desktop in the list of desktops. Okay, one of the things I haven't talked about setting defaults, why don't I take a moment here and just show you where that is, how that's done. Setting defaults is done in the administration module. If I come over here to configurations, I'm in the tour configuration. I can see search for like default, SPC defaults for new standards. This is where you can set up like your number of decimal places, whether or not to use the range chart, which real-time alarms will be checked by default when you click on new standard. You can also, under defaults, you look at SPC default reports. You see this is where you can set your defaults, like your default SPC report can be set in here, not this one specifically. Your default OEE report, your default DMS report, these can all be set in admin. Your default load date. This is where you can specify what your default load date is. If your default load date is way in the past and you really wish it was like, say, the beginning of this year or the beginning of last year, you can set the default load date, or you can change what your default time period is. See, the default time period right now for me in the tour database is set to default load today, but if I wanted to, I could change it to any time period that we want. So this is one that I think is really big. I see a lot of customers when I come on site that they're all the time, they're building a chart and they immediately go in and they change the date period. Well, if you're doing that all the time, set the default for that. It'll save you a lot of time over the course of a year.
Hey, Phil, or I'm sorry, hey, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
When you're setting default, I noticed that it was setting it for that config. If you have 50 configurations, is there a way to set that one for all of them? Did I put you on the spot there?
Yeah, you did, because I can't think of a way. If you do, please correct my ignorance.
I think if you highlight it, you should be able to go, and you're not sharing your screen. There should be an option to set for all. Up in the options, like all the way at the top. I think that's where it used to be. Like next to file, go to options. Nope, to the right of file. Apply current settings to all. So,
right, but the question of that is, it just does the ones that you're changing right now, correct? Because you wouldn't want to do all the changes that are in the configuration.
Correct. It's just the one that you're highlighting. So that is a good point. But I know I recently was with a customer, and they had tons of them. Said, "Oh my goodness, are we gonna have to change every one of them?" So.
Well, thank you for that. I learn something new every day.
Yay! I got a brownie.
I try to.
Or a Bowman point.
Oh yeah. Do you have any more questions that have come in for me?
Let me take a look here. I do not see any.
Okay.
Anybody have questions? Comment for another time saver? Oh, I do have one just coming in here. Are there any data entry time savers?
Loads of data entry time savers. That's not something that I can easily display, but it's typically, the time savers typically come in with a well-designed and built template and or inspection. I mean, that's one of the things we've been doing for years, is to streamline the data collection as much as possible, because data collection costs money. So if you got 5 guys out there that are all working to, in production, but they're taking an hour a day to enter data, if we can cut that down to a half an hour, you just save 2.5 hours per day. So it's not one really specific thing. That type of time saver really has to be built when we take a look at the operator workflow, and try and optimize the data collection to that workflow. There are some general things that I can mention. For example, if you can get the gauges directly interfacing to GainSeeker, or I'll say it the other way, if you set up GainSeeker to directly interface to gauges, that typically saves you some time. It also tends to reduce the amount of fat finger errors that you have. So, customizing the data entry to the operator workflow and connecting to your gauges. There might be some things like, I have some customers that instead of actually having to select the shift, we calculate the shift based upon the current computer clock. So that can reduce one thing in the data collection system that they have to enter each and every time. Drop-down list, so they're like choosing names from a drop-down list instead of having to type it in every single time. That's another thing that not only saves time, but improves data accuracy and integrity. Trying to think, what are some other things? Using the computer clock when appropriate instead of having to type in the date and time. Integrating to your ERP or other systems to try and complete information so people don't have to. A number of times I've written templates in our inspections that allow the user to input like a work order number. And then that work order number integrates to one of your systems and converts that to an item number or an SKU that we can then use to figure out what standards are going to be collecting data for. It can also do things like select, if you categorize the item, because I've had some people that had, like a item category and an item group, so they could analyze data above the level of the standards, and all that information was pulled from their systems, so they didn't have to enter that. Things like that can be major time savers, but it's tougher to try and say, hey, let me demonstrate that for you, because it's so situational specific.
Right. Hey, Chris, we did have another question come in. It says limit on slide scrolling in a dashboard, and I'm wondering if that's the slideshow option that you were talking about.
Okay. You want to say that again, just so I can?
Limit on slides scrolling in a dashboard is the way the question came in.
Okay, well, I'm thinking that that's probably more of a desktop issue, because that's where we have the slideshow. So in this case, I've got what looks like 20 different slides, 21, in this desktop, 20 different charts in this desktop. So if I click on desktop, now I'm spacing on where it is.
It's under desktop.
I just looked past it.
Yep.
Yes, there we go.
All the way at the bottom.
Yeah, okay, you can't use the button. You've got to go through the desktop menu, folks. That's where I got myself set up. So you can specify, how long you want your chart to display before it goes on to the next one, how often to refresh the data behind the charts. You can do transition styles, and if appropriate, what's the wipe direction. If you have the server edition, you can actually have it update, save files as an HTML behind the scenes and update it every time you refresh. But I'll just go ahead and click on Start. Okay, so there's probably some some limit in the hundreds or even the thousands on how many different slides you can have in a slideshow, but I don't think it's going to really be applying or be a limit for you guys. So I'm hoping that I'm answering your question here, but if not, please just, hey, submit a clarification to it, please.
Right. And if anybody else has any last minute questions, please feel free to let us know. Otherwise, you know, this slideshow is such a great segue for me to tell you guys about our next month's Tech Tip Live, which is putting it on the big screen, right? This would be a great example of putting something on the big screen. And when we talk about that, we're also going to be talking about our server edition and why it can be very beneficial for you. So if you haven't registered for next month, shame on you, I'm just kidding. Make sure you go ahead and do that. That will be with Phil. So if you missed him this month, he'll be back next month. Thank you, Phil, for letting me take this month's over. Let me double check here. I think we're pretty good. Chris, we got a couple more minutes. We can let him go. Or if you think of anything else that came to mind.
Nothing off the top of my head, except, you know, the sales department, they do have a service called design services. So if you think your data collection system might, there might be some opportunities for you to save some time and money by investing in the GainSeeker to try and reduce the time that it takes for you to, your operators to enter the data, you may want to call up Jen sometime and see what they can do for you.
Yeah. And Chris, if you can put the last slide up, I guess we will let you guys know that it is March 18th, and we will be posting a recording of this sometime next week. And again, always love the feedback, suggestions, you name it. Feel free to email me, email anybody, any contact you have. So I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes back to your life. Chris, thank you so much for being with me and being so informative. I certainly appreciate you taking your time.
No problem.
All right. Have
It
a
was
great
pleasure.
day, everybody.